What's up and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. This is your host, Jonathan Gelner, and thank you so much for joining us. Today's podcast is powered by Stick and Ball TV, the baseball and softball streaming platform. If you're unfamiliar with Stick and Ball, they are the go-to source for anything streaming baseball or softball. They have hundreds of videos updated weekly from some of the top coaches in the country. Go check it out at stickandball.tv or on the Stick and Ball TV mobile app. Today's podcast is sponsored by What About Baseball. It's no secret that we live in a world with constant electronic distractions. Families are spending less time together and kids often can't look up from their devices. But the What About Baseball brand is here to help. What About Baseball is a family-owned, baseball-centric business whose focus is on providing the best baseball toys, games, and accessories to bring family and friends back together to bond over the great sport of baseball. Starting with their best-selling Classic Edition board game, What About Baseball offers fun and exciting gameplay for fans at all levels, from beginner to expert. Whether you want to teach someone the basics of counting balls and strikes, or whether you are deciding if you should call the suicide squeeze, What About Baseball's Classic Edition board game is a proven winner and has the reviews to prove it. Even better, it's made right here in the USA. What About Baseball would like to reward Ahead of the Curve listeners 20% off their best-selling board game and free shipping. Go to whataboutbaseball.com/curve to get your special offer. Once again, that's whataboutbaseball.com/curve. On today's show, we have on Larry Vucan, head baseball coach at Southlake Carroll in Southlake, Texas. Larry took over in 2017 as the head coach at Carroll, and since he took over, they have reached the Final Four 3 times in his first 4 years and won back-to-back Texas High School 6A State Baseball Championships in 2018 and 2019. He was also named the Dallas-Fort Worth High School Baseball Coach of the Year in 2017 and 2019. A little background on Larry. He is a native of El Paso, played collegiately at New Mexico Highlands University, and played professionally in the Italian Baseball League, and also coached and managed there. On the show, we discuss how to communicate throughout a large program. They have 5 total teams. Larry also goes in depth with his player evaluation system, and that's vital with having 107 players in the program. And we also discuss how to get teams ready for postseason play. You're going to love this episode with Larry Vucan. Larry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Definitely, and I'm excited to learn from you today. I know that man, Southlake is such an awesome program, and really, you guys have gotten it rolling there, and you come from a really interesting background, and I know that those guys had heard that in the intro that you got to play a little bit in Italy. You're a native of El Paso, and so you've kind of made all kinds of different trips around the world, and then made yourself to Southlake. But I do want to ask you, first off, is how awesome was it playing in Italy, getting to eat pasta and pizza and then travel the countryside?
Yeah, that's honestly, Jonathan, that's probably the best experience of my life out of all of this, was just the time spent there. You know how it is. When you're going through it, you enjoy it, but you don't realize how much it's going to affect you and really be a part of you as you go forward. And the friendships and the connections made were far beyond, just like you figure out once you get into this coaching career, like you have long enough, that it's more about those relationships and the people that you get to come into contact with. Baseball is important and we love it and all that other stuff, but it's all those people. And that's what I think about Italy is all. Some of my best friends, quite honestly, in the world are still from Italy. I still have very close relationships there. So I know it's not the exciting stuff with the pasta and the traveling and all that other stuff. That was obviously fun, but we got to go back a couple of years ago, my wife and I, just to visit. She had never been there, and so that was nice to take her back to those villages and all the towns that we played in and stuff, and that was a lot of fun.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, let's rewind just to a couple of years ago, back in 2017, whenever you took over as the head coach at Carroll. And so just kind of walk us through just the vision of what you wanted, because I think most people hear Southlake, they hear great football program, great athletics in general. And I know you knew that. And it's like, okay, you're taking over, and I just wanted to hear like your thought process of, okay, here's some things that we're doing, what we did well or doing well. And here's some different things that I want to implement, and here's where we want to be in 3 or 4 years. So just kind of what did the vision look like for you whenever you took over the head coaching job?
Well, I think I was an assistant there, so I was an assistant since 2010-11. I came from El Paso, Franklin, and was a head coach there, and then spent 1 year at Northwest High School in Justin, Texas, not far from Southlake. Was actually in the district that year with Southlake Carroll, and was the pitching coach for Northwest High School, and got to see Southlake. And I, of course, had heard everything about Southlake, watching them in football and all this other stuff, the Blondies and all that stuff, and saw them in baseball in the Final Four in Round Rock, and I think it was 2008 when they lost to Plano. They had beaten Houston Bel Air in the semifinals, and so I kind of knew a little bit, but I never even thought for a second that I would have a chance to be at Southlake. And I don't even know if I really that was a goal, right? I needed a change, and I got out here and was a pitching coach, and then I talked to Larry Hughes after my first year at Northwest, and was fortunate enough to get on, and he said, "Come on over and." Get through the interview. If you can get through the teaching interviews, and I think quite honestly, that's the hardest part of getting into Carroll is getting through the screening and all the 28,000 interviews you have to go through and processes just to teach. And so I think once that happened, I felt good about it. And I was actually a volunteer my first year. I didn't get paid to coach at Southlake, and this is after 10 years of head coaching in El Paso. And so I get there and served from 2010, 2011. And all the way up to 2017, as you said, and under Larry Hughes, who's a legend at Southlake, a great coach, a great person, and so forth, and was his pitching coach for all those years. And once he retired, to get to your question, I essentially, I think, I didn't know immediately if I wanted even to. Obviously, I wanted an opportunity. I just knew the magnitude of Southlake and all that it entails. You have to be all in, obviously, all 100% in. And that's not just during the season, it's 365 there. And so I think I knew that by seeing it and what Coach Hughes had to deal with. And I just made a decision once it was opened up, I was going to take a shot at it. But you never knew. There were so many candidates that were applying for it and so forth. And so I had a plan. I was in California and waiting for my interview date and so forth, and visiting and enjoying vacation, and then jotting down ideas. And I thought, this time I'm going to really have a lot of fun. I really had fun at Franklin and El Paso as a head coach, but I was fighting myself so much. The kids were wonderful. The community was wonderful, but I was trying to be that hard nose all the time. And I don't know if I was really about building relationships. And one of the things I figured out, if I was going to do this again, it was going to be my way. And I didn't need to be a head coach to be fulfilled, is what I'm trying to say. And I had reached that point in my career where I felt really good about the classroom. I could have gone and done select and travel. And as you know, you can make more money doing that and so forth. But I wanted to take a shot at it. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it my way. So I jotted down exactly what I wanted to do. And once I got the position, I got hired and went in, and I said, I'm going to follow through with this plan. And we're going to be heavy on development. We're going to be heavy on and I'm basically building relationships throughout the program, making it a true program. And Coach Hughes did a great job with this. I just felt like I'm going to put my spin on it. That was all. And so I was going to be very inclusive. I remember as an assistant, I never even saw the freshmen. They were at a different campus. If you know anything about Southlake, there's the 9th and 10th grade campus, and there's 11th and 12th. And they're probably 2 miles apart. But none of us went down, the varsity coaches ever went down to see the freshmen. They practiced on the other campus. And so I never got to know them until they got up on the JV. And so I thought, I'm going to make this an all-inclusive kind of situation and really build it from the bottom up with a top-down mentality, if that makes sense, right? So obviously the top team is going to determine whether you can keep your job there or not. But we were going to really focus on development early on and building those relationships. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of what the first thing that I was looking for was, how can I connect with the kids and get them to understand what it meant to be a program.
I love hearing that. And for those not listening, or for those listening that aren't familiar with Southlake, it is the largest classification in Texas, so a very large school. And so a lot of schools, especially in the South, and I've been a part of those, you have like several different campuses, and it is very segregated at times. And so I've felt that as well. And you've only got, I don't know if you've got more than one baseball field, but most campuses in general only have one, or they may have an infield. And so I would love to hear how you made it all inclusive, because I think the standard is, yes, it is very segregated and separated with JV freshmen, and then the varsity or JV and varsity may be together. But I'd love to hear your thought process and how you started to integrate all three teams in one area.
Sure. I think, we do have two fields to answer your question. I think it's a natural surface. Both fields were natural surface at the time I got the job. And now obviously they've built the mammoth that it is now through some bond money and so forth. And that has been around for 2 years now. And so when you think of the new facility, it's amazing. But when I got there, and even when I got the job, it was not that way. And so we have a natural surface, which quite honestly is really good over at the 9th to 10th grade campus. And then we had a pretty good field over at the senior high campus, which was juniors and seniors. And so what we weren't blessed early on my first year. And even through the whole years, this was a big part of what I wanted to do. The vision was we didn't have fall baseball for freshmen. They all pretty much went to football at that time. And there was a coaching change in football at that time at Southlake. And so right in the middle of that, I got fortunate as I got the job. I kind of jumped in right in that opportunity time and was able to communicate with the 9th and 10th grade campus principal and then the senior high campus principal. And we also had a change in administration at the athletic department. And so with that happening, I was able to kind of ask them, hey, listen, can I get 9th grade baseball as an option for class in the fall? That's important for us to continue to get where we want to with the vision that I stated out in the interview process. And of course, it's hard when you state it like that for them to say, well, we hired you, but we want to follow through with what your plan is, right? So they were really good about that, and they went ahead with it, and they got me freshman baseball. So what I would say is that's the first piece of it was I was able to get freshmen an opportunity if they chose not to go football. We're all good if they do. Obviously, we all support, and I mean that sincerely. I'm not just saying that. There's a really good relationship at Southlake between football and baseball, and Coach Dodge does an incredible job working with us. And he was fine. I mean, we were able to get freshman baseball as an option. And so I think that was piece one. And so my first year, they were building the new facility at the senior high. So everybody was over at the high school. And so I would do the freshman in the morning, and it would just be me, because one thing they said, yeah, Larry, you can have the freshman baseball class, but we can't give you another coach. We can't give you another coach for that block. You can have your assistants for the afternoon block, but you can't have them in the morning. So I ran the entire freshman baseball class in the morning, and then I went and taught 2 AP psychology classes, and then I came back for afternoon baseball with the sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and so over at the senior high. And so that was tough, but I asked for it, and so I was going to invest in it, and I was able to kind of put the plan to work. And I think to be able to isolate, to get to know and connect with just the freshmen and me, and there was no other distractions, there was a big, big deal. And so that first group actually was the group that left last year and had won, essentially didn't lose a playoff. I haven't lost a playoff game in 3 years, essentially, that group going through. And so, that was an important, obviously, part and piece of it and so forth, to build my foundation, to convey the message of unity, of work ethic and attitude, and how you've got to go about practice, how you've got to wear your socks, how you need to wear your pants, how your hat needs to look, what we do with field maintenance, how you compose yourself and comport yourself in the dugout, how you comport yourself in the classroom and on the buses and in the restaurants and everything else like that. That was early on. I was able to kind of push that early on and get them to kind of buy in. And those who didn't obviously went on to football or did something else, right? But that was an integral piece. I still think if there was anything that I would look back to, that was a big part of it. And then we kept the class, and we still have it today. But now what we do is, because we have the large facility, they flipped it now, and we all go in the morning. And so everybody goes in the morning. So I have freshmen through seniors in the morning. And so we start practice even like today. We started at 7:15, and they'll go till 9 o'clock. And this is the 2 freshman teams, and the 2 JVs go. And then I'm there in the morning, and I'll be honest with you, I have a great staff. They work in the spring more. In the fall, I'm there every day with them. In the spring, I'm doing something in the office with scheduling or planning for the afternoon practice, and I bring the varsity back in the afternoon because, you know this, we're in there in January and February. You don't want your 90-mile-an-hour arms, if you have any, or whatever, to be throwing bullpens at 7:15 in the morning on an icy field in North Texas. And so, we don't get an extra class for them. We have to bring them back in the afternoon. So it's a 7 to 8 day. You asked today at 7 o'clock. I had just gotten here. You had said at 6:45, hey, can you hop on? I was like, no, I'm getting there. So I just got home. And so this is pretty much the day. I mean, it starts early and it ends late. And, I'm fortunate to have an incredible staff, but we're all together and we're all at one complex now. We don't really use the high school field, the 9th, 10th grade campus as much anymore.
I love that. I love hearing that. And I can only imagine just how much it means for, those underclassmen to get to see you every single day, because I remember being an underclassman and seeing the head baseball coach, and obviously it wasn't a program like Carroll, but it was just like, oh man, he's actually, paying attention to us. And so just building that connection early, I think is really, really cool. And so you mentioned just teaching them how to be a Carroll baseball player. Can you kind of walk us through what some of your standards or rules are, or at least expectations of what it's like to play there?
Yeah, first thing obviously is there's a lot of kids. I mean, it'll fluctuate. It's not that way this year, but it'll fluctuate. So think in terms of with 5 teams, you're talking close to 107 kids in the program to manage. And it's each team is playing 17 non-district or district games and regular season games plus 3 tournaments, and so we'll max out 18 is about 34 games, 33 games for each of the 5 teams. And so scheduling is tough. And so these kind of things, but I think, in order to do that, it has to be built upon respect. And I think the respect with all those kids coming in, the egos that are there, as you can imagine, they're phenomenal kids, but they do come prepared and they do have a background. They do have resources, let's be honest, that maybe others don't have with regard to lessons and select and travel. So there is a little bit of an advantage in there. Well, with managing all of that, you have to set a standard and expectation of how we're going to treat each other. And I think that has to be established first and foremost. And that, you get what you allow in anything. And so you have to model the behavior, and then you've got to reinforce the behavior consistently, because there are going to be hiccups. And even coaches are going to have hiccups. We're going to say things. We're going to raise our voice when we shouldn't. We're going to get emotional when we shouldn't. And so the big thing is not just coaching the kids, but it's also coaching our coaches about, this is how we want to respond to these kind of situations. Here's what I'll respond to. You give it to me. And I'll take care of it from there. So I think a lot of it has to do with these kids walking in. And you know this, you know enough about this. Carroll is a unique school in a lot of ways. It's no better nor any worse than any other high school, but it's a little unique with regard to such things. I don't know how Owasso is or some of these others, but the Dragon logo and Southlake Carroll in general, being the Southlake Carroll Dragon, and the logo and the scheme, the color schemes are the same for elementary, middle, and high school and senior high. They don't change. They're all the same. So that wasn't for me. When I was in school, I was a pony, then I was a Mustang, and then I was a trooper. I mean, I was a lot of different things, but I was never the same thing growing up. So a lot of these kids, most of them grow up, that's all they know. So a lot of that is a competitive advantage from a standpoint, is they work so hard to get into the program, to be a part of it. So when you're asking me, what are the standards? Well, the standards set by the community and the expectations. I wish I could claim that I had anything to do with that. The only thing I can do is make sure that they're going to treat each other with respect. They're going to treat their coaches with respect, the umpires with respect, the opponents with respect, and they're going to do things the right way as best as they possibly can. And when we say that, that's all great, right? Those are words, but you have to reinforce that and stay on that. And we fail at it too. You just got to stay on it and so forth. So even things, Jonathan, like how you take care of the batting cages, how you put the buckets back, the 22 buckets back. I mean, today I was on a kid, a freshman, because he didn't put the red bucket with the red buckets. He put it in a yellow column. And so little things, the detail about, hey, there's 12 balls in each bucket. When they're not machine worthy and the flap's coming off, that goes in the other bucket for soft toss. Do you understand how this works? And he'd come, yes, sir. And he's just a little freshman and so forth. But it's that attention to detail. And I hadn't talked to him all year. I had to ask what his name was, because I hadn't seen him all year. And, I was there for tryouts and so forth. But he's probably looking at me like, who's this crazy balding old man telling me about color of buckets and so forth. But I think that's established, and those are the expectations. And But it was done with a soft tone, and it was done with a smile at the end of it. And it's a connection, and it's something that, if I'm remembering, and I'm sure he's thinking about that tonight at dinner, those kind of things. And not because I'm anybody, but just like you said, it's the title does it, right? It's not me. It's just the title. So I think, these are how you connect with kids, that you take the time to teach and know until you get to know a kid, the kind of tone of voice you use with them, making eye contact, these kind of things. And then the kid will carry that on with his coach, whoever his JV or freshman coach is. And then you expect the coaches to do the same thing.
That's really neat. And it's 5 teams. That's quite a few to be able to coordinate throughout the year. So if you aren't already, you're earning your paycheck just for that. But
yeah.
With that,
but it's fun though. It's fun.
Oh, I'm sure, and it allows for a ton of kids to get a ton of playing time, which is obviously an issue in high school baseball. Everybody wants it, but with that, everybody wants to. You grow up in Southlake, everybody wants to be a Dragon, and you can only play at most 10 at a time if you have a pitcher and a DH. And so, walk us through kind of how that works as far as culture goes, because they're excited about being there, but then they get to the varsity level or JV level, freshman level, and they may not exactly go where it wants. How do you kind of steer the ship the right way? Because we may be in the time of year where a lot of us are going through that, where the kids are frustrated because they're not playing at wherever they are, or they're not getting the college looks, or whatever it may be. But just kind of walk us through how you steer the ship, because you've obviously done a good job and you've had lots of experience doing so. Would you have any advice for the coaches going through a similar situation?
Well, I hope this is the right advice. I don't know if I have anything figured out. I can tell you that. What I will tell you this is, it goes back. It's not about skill development. It's not about, hey, this is where your head, where the bat needs to be at load with regard to front foot contact and the plane, and with your elbow getting into slot and the barrel getting on line. And it's not that. It's really not. And I know nobody wants to hear this because it's not mechanical application and functional movement and stuff. But I will tell you flat out, it's relationships. And so how do you keep them fired up, and how do you get them excited to come in every day at 7:15 in the morning when there's dew on the field and it's cold, and the expectation is that they don't miss. Well, I think a lot of that is making connections, is communicating with kids, smiling at them, letting them know, going over to a kid, being aware, just a sense of awareness in your own program, that you look at a kid in left field. I took the time to talk to that kid today and smile at him at the bucket stuff. It's being able to go over and watch a kid, and maybe you see that he doesn't drop step well on a fly ball and he hasn't played. And I see the stats on Monday morning. I have to get a report from all of our coaches every Monday morning about the week previously. And so I get their stats. They have to write me a little bit of a summary on what they're thinking with regard to players and personnel and so forth. And then I go through the game changer and look at, kind of match it up in the mornings and so forth. And so I'll look at a kid and I'll take a highlighter and I'll go through his name and see, man, this kid is, he was 0 for his last 18. And I look at it and maybe he hasn't played in the last 3 games. And of course I know why, because he was 0 for 18. So I'll put on a little card. Hey, go visit with David Johnson. Okay. And so if I walk out there, I'll go out to left field and I'll see him out there, and he's not sad or anything. It's not like that, but I'll go up there and communicate with him and stand next to him and say, hey, bud, we're so excited you're part of this program. We can't wait. You're going to be so good. It's just taking time, I know, and I know you're frustrated, but you just stay with it. What's your plans this summer? Who are you going to play with? What's your plans with weights and conditioning to get stronger? What are you excited to be a Dragon baseball player in the future? Because we sure are. Those kind of things. And it's a 2-minute deal. And then I walk off, and I've gotten some answers from him and so forth. And so I don't know if that always works. You can still have kids that are down and maybe move on to other programs. There's no doubt. But I know that if I was a kid, I would want that, and that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So I think taking the time to do that, and I still fail at that. I mean, I can tell you over the last 3 weeks with this COVID thing, it's been even crazier that I haven't gotten out to connect with the freshmen in JV as much as I want to this year as I'd like to. And so I would tell you, the advice I would have is the smallest guy you think in your chain is the most important one, right? Is build it from that standpoint. And just the little things of connections goes a long way, because now you've made that kid's day, and he'll go talk to another kid, and he's going to rub off on the kid and say, hey, dude, let's go after school. We don't want to practice after school. Let's go get extra hitting in the cages at the high school. Let's go do this. And you've lit a fire now, and that fire starts to build around, and others come into the fire. And so I think that keeps them coming back. I think part of our issue is with regard to like varsity. We've got 34 kids on the varsity, and only 9, like you said, 10 or 11 are playing, and maybe 13. But that's where your developmental program comes in. That's where your BP. You have to be creative with your batting practices. You can't hit everybody, or else practices would be 4 hours, right? So you got 4 groups of 4. You want to be in the top 16, but that's where you identify every day. You take metrics on HHBs every day, just like we do in the fall, and say, hey, man, you're killing it here. So it just takes a couple managers who are in the cages with you, where you're not getting live BP, that are taking HHBs. And Jonathan wins HHBs in the cages. He's not getting live BP. He's not playing a lot, but he wins. The last 2 days, he's won the HHBs off of the right-handed curveball machine and off the plus fastball machine and off front toss. And we take those numbers and we say, hey, Jonathan, hey, jump in. You're one of the 16 today. And so the kid feels like, God, it's worthwhile to excel and to do well, that the coaches are going to see this. And we miss it too. I mean, we get the numbers, and there are times where we do miss it, and there's no doubt. But we try to do the best we can to identify those guys, and we always keep a spot open to pull somebody in to keep them motivated as they go through the season, because it does get long. I mean, the last 3 years we've been going, well, 2 years. COVID stopped that, but it was 2017, we're in the Final Four. 18 and 19, we won it. We felt like we had a chance to three-peat last year before we got broken up, but who knows what would happen. But the point is that we start January 28th, like you all probably do in Oklahoma. And then you go, for us, it's a beatdown to get to the state tournament. It's all the way till June 7th, 8th, or 9th, right? So think January to all the way to June. And the weather changes, graduation comes, prom comes, all these things come. And to keep 34 kids and 17 or 18 of them that haven't played since the tournament season, it's difficult. So you've got to do other things other than baseball. You got to know about their brother and sister. You got to know what their plans are for college. You got to know about, hey, thanks for this. Thanks for the community service you put in, this, and that. And you've got to make those relationships valid and livable so that they want to come back.
No, I love that. I love that answer. And, for me, being an assistant too, it's a little bit different than your situation as the head coach. But I think I've really tried this spring to rectify a wrong of mine, which was really focusing on the guys that are playing, and instead trying to find those situations of where guys are disappointed, like the senior that's not getting the playing time that he wants, or the guy that's hurt who's not really getting included in all of the different stuff, and then just being present next to them, like not trying to have a conversation about really anything other than baseball, but just checking in on how they're doing. I think that, as an assistant, that is a great opportunity for all of us to be able to do that. And again, I love it. It does even mean more from the head coach, from that perspective too, but just as a way of us as assistants trying to do a better job of looking for those situations and being aware, because you've got so much on your plate. But another thing that I wanted to really dig into as much as possible was you're developing a player evaluation system. And you previously mentioned 10 or 15 minutes ago that you have 107 players in the program. And I just, man, that's just unimaginable of trying to figure out, okay, who are our best 9 in any given day? And I'm sure, the top 3 in the lineup.
I still haven't figured it out. Trust me.
Yeah. Oh man, it's walk us through what you do and how you've developed that system.
Well, I developed it at Franklin only, and initially I developed it in El Paso. And this is one of those things when you're asking me about the standard I was going to set, what I was going to do if I got the job at Southlake. And so I just was going to do it my way. And I think one of the things at Franklin that we developed, it was for the wrong reasons, quite honestly, when I developed the program. And it was just a small piece of what I do now with the evaluation system. But when I developed it there, I just knew we had to hit BP every day. And I knew we had to defend every day, live off the bat. And I knew that I wanted our base runners to get looks every day off of the base with reading outs, whether it's less than 2 outs, 1 out, what you're doing on a ball hit to your right at second base versus left, how to read line drives off the bat, all these things. And I wanted to find a way to calculate, to take it down and jot it down and have my forms and then put it all together. And then every Monday put it up so the kids could see and figure out a percentage system and all this other stuff. So I went out and got managers to do it for me at Franklin, but it was for the wrong reason. It was so that I had gotten a lot of emails and consternation from parents that year because I was not a communicator. I had to learn to be that. I was the gruff coach who said it's my way or the highway, and that's what I had learned, and I thought that's the way it was. And I thought I'm in charge now. I'm in charge, and I realized very quickly that all that does is get you removed from being in charge if you're not careful, right? And so I think after learning from that, I started to think, man, what I want to play in my program. And that's actually what my wife asked me at the dinner table because I was miserable after my first year. And she goes, why do you do it then? And I was like, I don't know the why. And I had to really think about that. She goes, would you want our son to play for you? And that hit me. And I was like, wow, interesting. And so I, of course, rubbed her off and said, of course I would. But then when I walked away, I was like, man, I don't know if I would or not, And so I developed this system as a way initially to combat against the parent who asked me about playing time or JV. Why are they on JV, not on the varsity? And how do they get into this? And, my son's an all-star in select and travel and can't even make your varsity. That says more about you than it does him. And, all these questions you would get and so forth. And so that's what it was. And so I had to figure out a way how to get it done. And so I went out and got managers and I basically got girls and guys who didn't want to take PE class and got them a PE credit. And I walked into PE class and asked Flo Valdez, who was the PE coach at Franklin at the time, and say, Coach, do you have any that I can talk to that might want to do this? And they're just doing jotting. They're not running and they don't like PE and they don't want to run and do all this stuff. And she says, yeah, these kids don't do anything. They sit by the wall. And so I went over and talked to them and said, hey, I can get you a PE credit. You won't have to come after school. I just need you during the block. Could you help us? And this, and that. And then the next year, I went a step further and went into the math classes, the highest AP classes. And I said, I need you to help me develop a system where I can get down to one number. And I think that's what they did. And that's when I came up with helped get the index number coming down. I needed to learn Excel really well. So I immersed myself and I'm still figuring out more and more on Excel so that I could add the columns on my own and not have to. I was doing so much paperwork, Jonathan, every week just to get those sheets up. But I wanted Jonathan to walk in on Monday every morning in the fall and go in and look at this sheet and see where they rank with base running errors versus positives and then what they did hitting HHBs on number of swings. And I wanted to make sure that they knew what their fielding errors and chances and attempts were, assists. So I had to teach the kids how to do that is what I had to do. So it took me 2 weeks to model. So we did conditioning and weights with my assistant for 2 weeks. And all I did for 2 weeks was basically teach those 7 kids, hey, listen, I gave them all T-shirts. I took care of them. I think I give them gift cards to something. I said, guys, if you'll do this well for me, man, I'll take care of you, this, and I'll write you letters of recommendation. I'll do everything I can, community service hours, all this stuff. But I need this to really work. And so they did. And, a couple of these were girls in classes and stuff. And I said, the only rule is you can't talk to my baseball players. You can't go out with them. And please, I don't want any of that. And so they basically knew they would come set up. And at that time, I don't know how it is at Owasso, but it's a 90-minute block, but 30 minutes is for study hall. And then you can practice for 55 minutes, right? So that 30 minutes would be downtime, and we couldn't practice in that time. The girls and the guys, the managers, would all set up the rollaway cage. They put the pitching platform down, the L screen, the screen at first, at second, taught them how to do that, how to put the BP mat down and all the things that they did. And then they would get their clipboards and they would go to their stations. So when we were released and we changed clothes, we could use every minute we possibly could to get on there and start our rotation, our group rotation. And they knew. So a couple of them were in charge of the HHBs. Some were in charge of just watching the middle infield. Some were in charge of just watching the corner infielders. Some were in charge of watching the outfielders. And then we had those in charge of the base runners. So it was pretty extensive by the time we got it. And they were stationed all over the field so they didn't get hit by fly balls and so forth. But it was a tally system, Jonathan. That's all they did is they tallied basically mistakes versus positives. And on the pitching side, I would say I would throw BP every day. That's why I don't have an arm anymore. I got these great assistants to throw BP. But I threw every day in the fall, and I made them use wood so that I could really tell whether they were squaring up the pitch on the barrel versus on the knob and the handle. And so we got the El Paso Diablos to donate. The Chicago Cubs donated out of spring training. Guy from El Paso was the equipment manager, and after spring training broke, he sent me like 50 bats. So we just use wood. And so they tallied up, and every Monday. And then I thought, man, that's all great, but how am I going to get down to, how am I going to really know? Well, when it changed for me was when I started to notice that the people with the HHBs were the ones who were really the grittiest ones in my lineup. And I was like, man, there's a positive correlation here. How do I prove or disprove that correlation in the system? And so sure enough, I just developed, I said, I'm going to get down to an index number and get down to one number. And so it started with HHBs, then it was fielding percentage, and then it became weights and conditioning. Then it became all sorts of different metrics, classroom achievement, how you kept the locker room. We did index numbers for everything. And then all of those other index numbers, it came down to one index number. And I was adding more and more stuff and saying, Jonathan wins the index championship with regard to what we called WAR at the time. And now it's Dragon Performance Index, but DPI. But we take that number and we say, okay, over the years, how is Jonathan? Is he a dude that we can actually, he won the fall from, August all the way till December when we broke for Christmas break. We were able to see that Jonathan won the overall index number. And we look at it and go, man, is he a dude that's also there in June when we're in Round Rock? Or is he a dude that's there going through the grind of the playoffs that we can count on? And it started to match up. And that's when I got excited. And I was like, man, there's something here with this. And so that's when I basically bought into the whole darn thing and started developing more and more of it. And it became what it is today.
No, I love hearing that, and I love your process too. But I'm trying to imagine this, and maybe you can paint a picture for me. So varsity's 34 guys. I'm sure you have some pitcher onlys, but
yes.
So you guys do defense, base running, and hitting groups every day. And I'm assuming you're rotating off of the hitting groups. How many rounds and how many opportunities do they get?
Okay, now this is what I'm talking about with the evaluation system is primarily in the fall, right? To get down to find out who my 34 are and then who my 24 are for the JV black and 20-something for the JV green and then the freshman red and yellow. So then that helps me make cuts because there's probably 60, 70 kids that we don't keep around that have come out, right? So that helps me get done that and to pick who's on what roster. You know how this is. There's some juniors that don't make varsity that are pretty good that you put down on JV, and a lot of that has to do with the development in the fall. In the spring, we don't do the WAR or the DPI in the spring. It's been developed, and now I don't want them focused on that kind of stuff. I want them to focus on skill development and going through it. We still we hit live every day, but there isn't the emphasis with regard to the people around tallying everything up. We don't tally in the spring. This is our game season. So we break up basically everything we do into the different seasons. We have the fall off season program, which we do daily. Then we have the fall league that we do that you probably do at Owasso as well, where you have a fall league that you play probably Jinx and all these different schools in and so forth and that kind of stuff. And then we have the spring season starts, and then we have the tournament season, and then you get into the district season, and then you get into what we call championship season, right? And so, which is that push for an opportunity to have a chance to get to Round Rock. And so, these are all these seasons broken up, and each one of them has a different component and element to it. And so in the spring, the element is, hey, listen, we're going to play baseball. This is when we get to have fun and play baseball. And, it's more with regard to strategy and what we're doing on scouting reports. It's not going to be the HHBs and the index numbers at that point. I mean, this Game Changer tells us all that.
Right. I love that. So let's rewind a little bit. So you've really outlined most of the fall for us, and I thank you for doing that. So you guys start, I guess you've got them in the block schedule, which is for most an hour and a half, and I think you mentioned that. You get them January 1, and then January 28th, you can start practicing after school. And then you start scrimmages in like 2 weeks, I think. So I want to know. So you get them back from winter break, and you're first week of January you've got them for an hour and a half, and then you get to the end of January you've got them for a little bit longer. But within that month period to the month and a half period, what are the things that you're like, okay, we've got to have X, Y, and Z done before we get to scrimmages, or X, Y, and Z done before we hit tournament season in the middle of February?
Well, I mean, you have the tryouts, right? So the tryouts are a big part of that. And really, it's 55 minutes. We have an hour and a half blocked to that, but we can only work out for 55 minutes. So we'll do that from January when we get back from the break. And what we're ironing out here is roster development, right? So we're trying to figure out rosters. We have the index from the fall, which I laid out for you. We have those numbers. And then when we go through, we're getting now a different flux of kids that we didn't have in the fall that went through the DPI because they're in football. And football around here goes pretty late too. And so they come late, and especially this year, so they come flowing in after the break. And then you have the basketball kids a little later and the wrestling kids a little later and so forth. And so they come in. And so you have to integrate them into the practice scenario. And their time is very limited. Their window is small to be able to make a roster, right? Unless they've established themselves and they've been returners or they've been on the varsity and they've made an impact, these kind of things. And you already know about them. But so really what we're trying to do in that time period when we come back, Jonathan, is roster development, right? Is to figure out, okay, we're playing 3 tournaments and we've got, we know we're going to play 6 games in each tournament, a doubleheader each day, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We're going to play 18 games prior to the time that we really got to be ready to go for district season for our first game, right? And so we schedule very hard. So if we've got 34 kids, like this year we scheduled at we had the first tournament with the Rangers at the ballpark in Arlington, which is Globe Life, and we had IMG Academy there. They came even this year. We would have had the California schools, Mater Dei, and we would have had Orange Lutheran and some of these others. I think Mater Dei was coming. I know for sure Orange Lutheran was coming, J. Sarah, some of these other schools, and the Phoenix schools, Hoover, Alabama, which is an incredible program. Parkview, Georgia, I think had said no, but they were going to come next year. So we're scheduling all these high level tournaments, and then week 2 and week 3 are difficult. You schedule hard, and it looks like that because if you got 34 kids on, and Jonathan is the second string shortstop in your viewpoint based on what you've evaluated. Well, when Jonathan, we play separate lineups every doubleheader. So maybe our top dudes will play in game 1 against IMG. Well, when we go and play the second game in the doubleheader on Thursday, and Jonathan's a second stringer and gets in, we want to make sure that if we're really going to build depth, and if David, who's ahead of Jonathan at shortstop, is playing against IMG, well, I don't want Jonathan to go 4 for 4 when David went 0 for 4 against IMG because you're playing lesser talent. And then I get an email from your mom and says, hey, he should be the starter. He was 4 for 4. And yeah, but the competition's different. So I think scheduling roster development is critical in that you make sure you're playing the top level competition you possibly can so that you get a fair and accurate assessment and evaluation of your kids against quality pitching. And that's a big, big part of it. So you're asking me what's on my mind with regard to developing and laying that out. It's really about how can we schedule? Are these guys competition ready? And yeah, they may be the second guys, but they're going to play. They're going to play 9 of the 18 games. They're going to get in and play, and we're not going to worry about results as much at that time.
I love hearing that, and I love just again how intentional everything that you're doing is, even to the point of we want every player to have an equal opportunity against the same competition, so we can truly find out, are all of these hits versus a guy who's throwing 62 or 92. So it's a big difference there, and I love that. So during the season, and this is something that I've never really experienced as a head coach of just kind of seeing. And as the assistant, you have all the answers, and I think all the assistants out there have gone through that of where, hey, we would do things differently. You go through the season, and you are trying to figure out when to push, when to pull, how much to do team defense versus how much we need to be lifting weights versus how much we need to be getting them in bed early and trying to have a feel for that, and just give us some advice in regards to that, because it's a really open-ended question, and it depends on the team, on the game, on the year, on the time of the week, which season that you're in. You mentioned 3 of them, but just I would love to hear your thoughts on developing a feel for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of that. I will tell you, there's not a one way fits all. Okay, so I'll tell you that. I'll give you an example that may help you answer it directly, what you're asking is like today, for example, we lost last night to a very good Keller baseball team that has now taken over first place, and we're in second place, right? And so today we came in, and we don't play again until Friday, our next district game. And so we came in today, and we know our plan. Our plan today was to be proactive. It's been this way for a while, but it's changed and adapted. It's dynamic, not static. And what we do is we do plate workouts, right? We're trying to get them healed. We're extreme stretching. We do some long toss to tolerance. And then we get into the weight room and we do what we call our plate workout, which is designed essentially to be more of a, of aerobic kind of mentality with 45-pound weights that we do different exercises and go through a circuit with that. Well, there was a feeling last night after we lost amongst myself, and I had to really get with my assistants and primarily with Coach Whiteley, who's our pitching coach and top assistant. I was on the phone with him this morning and going back and forth. I know this is our plan. Do we need to scrap that after last night? I mean, we struck out 11 times last night. They had a dude on the mound over there at Keller is 96 miles an hour with a hook. And, we struck out 11 times, but we still out-hit them 8-6, and our HHB levels were high. But when you strike out 11 times, you don't put enough pressure on the defense. So we need to be better. Maybe we need to spend the Wednesday and scrap the plan, and let's get into the cage work, and let's work on being able to get into 0-2 count situations. And what can we do? Let's get a nasty hack attack 52 breaking ball that's going to break out of the plane and see if we can at least foul it off, because the pitcher's likelihood not going to throw that again intentionally where he wants to, and he's going to miss, and it'll be up, and we bang it, right? And so the idea was, let's scrap it. And he went round and round. He said, yes, okay, yeah, let's do that. We need to be better, and we need to be more consistent with contact. We made 3 errors in 1 inning, which is not like us at all. And we made 3 errors in 1 inning, and that was really the difference there. And so, and we play on turf. The game was on dirt, so there was a lot. Hey, let's take them. Let's get the infielders over on the dirt field at the high school, and then the other guys can work on this, and we could scrap the weight work and the stretching and the long toss and all that other stuff. In the end, I decided not to, and I just basically, it wasn't for any other reason except, this is what we do. If we really felt like we weren't playing well, our kids' attitudes weren't good, it's a pulse and a feeling, then I maybe would have done it. But I just felt like, the kids are in this groove. This is what we do. And if I show panic and I try to change things, they're going to feel that. So when they walked in today, they're probably looking. I said, guys, we're on plan, man. You guys, listen, we didn't play great last night, but I don't have any doubt in you. I said, so let's just stick to the plan and we'll get after it. Then Thursday, when we come back tomorrow, we'll get into a little longer practice and preparation. We'll do our scouting report, get into preparation for a very good Keller Central team on Friday. And so, I think, and we did, we went through our workout, but the point I'm trying to make is there's consternation in that as well, even doing this for 30 years. And even being in a place like Southlake, you question a lot of things. And so it's never going to go away. But what I would tell you is the more experience you get, the more you have a feel for, and this is where your leaders come in on your team, right? You trust the guys there and you have conversations. We have a group called the All Greens that are voted on by the players. And, I consult with them a little bit. I don't give them a whole lot of leeway, but what I do is communicate with them and say, hey, what's the pulse? What's the feel here with this, and that? And sometimes what they say, I listen to, and other times I say, hey, listen, I don't think so. We're going to go ahead and go this way, and so forth. But I do want to know the pulse, right? And the kids were fine. And I thought, well, let's just go through with what we do, and let's don't sound like we're out of sorts here. And so hopefully that'll go a long way. So if it was a different message, Jonathan, it might've been, let's get in the cages and let's get the other group over at the dirt field at the other campus. And let's take about 500 ground balls off those dirt, and react that way. And that's what most coaches do, right? And I had to learn this, is when you make a bunch of mistakes or errors like this, when you want to go fix it right away, you want to put the Band-Aid on it, right? But you got to remember, it's a process. You've built that up. Kids, and I told them today, I said, you know what? Keller practices too. They work at it. They're in the cages. Their pitchers do bullpens. They work hard too. They're a year-round program as well. They're very well coached. And so you're going to fall short every now and then. I said, but it doesn't mean you need to panic. You just need to stay the course. We know what our development looks like. We know what efforts we've put in from day one all the way through. And so we're just going to trust the process is what we're going to do.
No, that's fantastic, and I love hearing that advice. And again, it's coming from an experience, and then you're reading the pulse, and you're getting all these different feedback, and then you're ultimately deciding, hey, this is what we think, and so I really I appreciate the honesty and the transparency behind that. You also mentioned, and this is another interesting take too. You guys haven't lost a playoff game since you've taken over as a head coach, so. Let's go ahead and break that down
Oh, well,
and
that's
give us your secret sauce, because I would
well, that's
love
not
to hear
completely
that.
true. Well, we have. I mean, I don't mean it like cocky. I mean, I think this is the most humbling game there is, right?
Oh,
And I mean that
absolutely.
not just to say it. It's definitely true. I mean, I think we've been fortunate, and we have lost. We in 2017 in round one we played Plano High, and we won game one, and then we lost game two 5-4, and then as you know, it's 6 rounds in Texas just to get 6 weekends just to get to Round Rock, right? Or 5 weekends, and then you get to Round Rock for the semifinal and then the final if you're fortunate enough, right? So we lost that round one to Plano in game two, and then came back and won game three, won the series. And that same year, we lost to, if you count it as a playoff game, the Final Four. We lost 3-2 in the state semifinal to Deer Park out of Houston, right? But we hadn't really lost. We didn't lose in 18, and we didn't lose in 19. Okay, and so when you look at all the games, and I've been in this now, as I was telling you, a very long time. It's mind numbing how in El Paso and everywhere else I've been, even in the Metroplex, even when I was a coach at Southlake as an assistant, you would always lose a game in a best of 3 series. You'd have to pull out, or these kind of things, and you might lose a game every week and win the series, right? So yeah, it's been a crazy run for sure, and they've been with 2 different groups. So it's not been the same group of kids. It's been 2 different groups kind of that have done this, and so that part of it has been very exciting. And but it's like George Patton says, right? I'm a big George Patton fan. He says all glory is fleeting, so it's just a matter of time before it all bursts, right? So we'll
No,
enjoy it
and
now.
again, it's to commend you, but also by the time this airs, a lot of schools in the South will be preparing their teams for championship season, and so I would love to hear just your thoughts on how do you prepare your team for championship season?
Well, I think you cut back. I'll tell you what we do is we cut back on the practice length. It's getting warmer. And I think what we do is we get it more into group rotation. We try to make it a lot more fun than just laborious. You've got kids who now that haven't played in a long time, as going to the earlier part of this podcast, you were talking about, well, how do you keep those kids engaged? And, you got graduation coming. You have some seniors who haven't played in a long time. Their parents are putting pressure on them. You got family coming for graduation. And yet we're still trying to play and trying to get these kids committed, because as we talked about, if those kids start to float away, well, the rest of them feel it, right? So you got to keep them engaged. So I think just making practice fun, making it lighter. The skill development part, we'll pick a day where we're really trying to refine whether it's our back picks or it's our bunt coverages, or we're working on first and third offense, what we're trying to do, or what we're trying to do on the contact play at third. So we'll have an element there with regard to really emphasizing a specific thing we want to do better at. But then it really revolves around group rotation in our BP system, because we get a lot of work. We get live look off just BP. It's not a normal BP situation where we don't shag. We don't ever shag. I mean, there's 3 outfielders out there, and the POs are on the warning tracks, and they stay away from the outfielders. If the outfielders can't get to it, then they hold their position and they get ready for the next one, right? They're not chasing. And so it's a lot of live looks along with intentional, and I call it this, intentional fungo. And so the screens are out, and we're working specifically, whether we have a machine and a PO is feeding, or a coach is hitting if he's not working on something else. We're working 5-4 feeds, or we're working 6-4-3 with an auxiliary first baseman up the line with a screen protecting him. And then maybe while we're throwing BP, we have other screens that are lined up on the wings where we're trying to work inside game and stay inside the baseball. And if they hit the screen, then, that's a bad situation. They lose a couple cuts or whatever, but they got to stay inside the baseball, hit the ball at the middle. And so when that's happening, then we work the 5 unassisted put out, or the 6-5 rare play there, so third base is not getting hit because there's a screen there off of BP. So it's just really that kind of intention with regard to what we're doing with batting practice. But everything revolves around the batting practice as we get into the championship season. So we cut down on our segments. Our individual stuff starts to cut down. We don't do as much. We don't need as many POs getting. So Wednesdays not Wednesdays during district season, but Wednesdays in the tournament season, we'll have guys throw on Wednesdays live against hitters that haven't thrown in a while. So that's a station. So we'll do a lot of mixed stations where 4 of our hitters are rotating in group 1 over to live against a pitcher who hasn't thrown but needs to get work. And he'll throw almost like a simulated BP of 24 pitches. And we got 4 hitters going to see it, and they get 3 pitches. And they may work bunt. They may work late show, early show, whatever it is they're doing. If it's short game, they're working slash hit and run, that kind of stuff. And so, it's all that stuff starts to kind of go away as we get into the championship season. And now it's about, hey, listen, let's get them in, let's get them their work, and let's get them out. And that's kind of what we do. And so, the talks are more frequent. The communication is more engaging. The passion for what we're doing is there with regard to the selling of, we spend a lot of time on preparation with regard not only to us, but what we're going to do with scouting reports and who are our next opponents and so forth. So it's not as much of the segmentation of the big practice schedule like it is, at this point. It's now into just trying to meet those connections and get these guys rested too. It's a balance, right? I mean, it really is.
No doubt, no doubt. And you hear that all the time, but I appreciate you telling us what you're cutting back on, because it's it's not easy when you're looking at a practice schedule going, man, we may see this, we may see that. And you hear coaches similar to yourself who are like, hey, you got to cut back time. And then you may or may not go watch a practice and it's still almost 3 hours. And you're like, well, what are you cutting back on? So I really appreciate the honesty.
Yeah. It's a 12-minute rule. I will tell you this. It's a 12-minute rule, right? And so if you can't get it done in 12 minutes, you need to get off. Because you can sit there and for 12 minutes, you can watch it go to hell on the first and third bunt coverage, and you're talking to them. And we've been doing this since August, and it's like, why are we struggling with this? And instead of enduring through it for 15, 20, let me get a couple more reps to feel good about this. Well, what you're doing is making yourself feel good. The kids are just getting annoyed. But you want to feel good when you go home, right? It's about you. And so once you separate that and let it be about them, get them what they need, then you can talk effort, right? You can talk effort and say, listen, it was your effort level. It's not your execution. You'll execute if your effort's there, right? And so I think you can get that talk done separately of another 15 minutes of that drill. And so that's a thing I learned is more ego than anything else. It's about us as coaches, why we want to keep going. The kids are like, Coach, we've been doing this forever. How many more reps do I have to get of this? And so you got to get your stuff done. You do, but I think it's more like the sprinkle side. You put a little flavor on it and you move on to the next thing as you get there. Or else you're going to wear them down, man. You really are.
No doubt. Well, I've got some quick hitters here, and then we'll let you go. And, while we're talking about championship season, again, by the time this airs, we're going to both be in the middle of it. And so best of luck, and looking forward to seeing how well that you guys do in the long Texas playoff system that it is. So, but I do have
you guys too. Good luck.
Oh, thank you. So with that, what is something that you've learned lately that's gotten you really excited?
Oh, there's a lot of things I've learned lately, mostly in my AP psychology class, that virtual learning doesn't work. That's what I've learned lately. But no, with regard to baseball, I think it's going to go back to something you're going to be tired of hearing, but it's making connections with kids. I mean, it really is. It's the tone, the effort, the attitude, the support system that goes behind these kids. And when they fail, how are you going to support that? How are you going to get on board with them? How are you going to make that connection so that they feel good about themselves because they have the skill, or else you wouldn't have picked them in the first place, right? So you just got to find a way how to keep their spirits up. And listen, I'm as hard on kids as anybody. Trust me. I'm not sweet. There's no doubt. And I'll come across, and I'm attack mode at times. But then I think with that in mind, as long as you built up those relationships and the kids know where you're coming from, and you give them a pat on the back and you tell them, I'm going to be there with you to keep getting better, I think they'll buy into what you're doing. And so I think my challenge is always to do that. So I'm still searching for how I can get better with regard to connecting with kids, because that's always changing with the technology and stuff.
For those familiar with finite and infinite games, I feel like that one is an infinite one. It's ever changing, and it's a never have arrived one for sure. So next question I've got for you. What is something that you have changed your mind about?
Oh man, I thought virtual learning was going to be a good thing. It's not. Okay, so I will tell you that in the classroom. I know I keep going to that because that's what's on my mind. Well, I mean, I think with regard to baseball, I think you know, there's a lot of things. Last night I thought it would be nice to allow my varsity team to get BP on the field, and we had a JV scheduled game there, and it was going to make us have to hit BP in the cages, and I wanted to go through my rotation, and so I quick challenged and changed my JV game over to a city park, and I realized within probably an hour that that was a mistake because not only, from some feedback I got, why are we not playing at the senior high and this, and that from parents? I thought, well, I sit there and talk about connection and about value of every team, and I'm sending them off just so my guys can get BP. So I think I changed my mind about that. In the big picture, I think I've learned that I've changed my mind about like what we talked about with regard to length of practices. I've changed my mind about regard to short game and how to utilize the bunt in the day and the age of the composite, the kind of bats we're using these days. I value that much more. So the emphasis on that. I value much more the extreme long toss program that we've implemented. I've changed my mind on that. I was not a huge long toss guy for a long time. I'm definitely on board with that. I'm definitely on board and changed my mind with regard to the use correctly of weighted balls for arm development. So there's quite a bit that I've changed my mind on, to be honest with you.
Sure, that's a great list. What is a drill that your players love that we can steal from you?
I don't know if you'd have to ask the players if they love all the drills, but we're really drill oriented in the fall and the early spring, and I think one of the drills we do. I'll tell you what I love the best because I think it pays the most dividends. I don't know if the kids would love it the most, but I think the one that I love the most, and the kids fake it at least well with me and smile. Yeah, it's great, coach. But is our base running drill when we put an L screen up and we have a coach throw from 35, 40 feet, and we have a group that's hitting. And in that group, there's a runner on first, second, and third. And we have a defensive group out there at all positions. We're playing it live. They get one pitch. The hitter is hitting hit and run. The runner at first base is working hit and run with the hitter. The runner at second is working tag halfway, or he's in hover mode, trying to figure out whether to tag or go on the ball based on his reads of the outfielder. And then the runner at third is working what we call red or gold on ground balls, and we move the infield in halfway or back, and they have to read what's going on there on down angle, line drive, or fly ball to score. But the runners they're working all independently of each other, so the bases aren't loaded for each of the runners. And the outfielders are changing their cuts from cut 2 to 3, and the runners that run 90 feet have to read that. The hitter hits the ball off the hit and run, and he runs around first and makes his banana route and has to really attack second and drop his hips and slow down and be able to get back to first and read the throw. So I think that drill is a 12-minute segment that I absolutely love, and it's paid dividends for us with regard to because I think that's really what has been a difference for us. If I had to tell you anything, it's been how we run bases and, quite honestly, how we steal bases. I mean, that's a big part of it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And then finally, what is a resource or book or program that has really shaped you as a coach, or something that you recommend to any of our listeners to go out and better themselves? It could be psychology or baseball or, head coach or just person, whatever you want. But what is something that comes to mind?
Well, the most important book to me, it's always by my bedside, and I've had it for a long time. I'm not going to tell you I read it every day or anything like that, crazy, but it's when I wake up, it's there. It's important to me. Is Lincoln on Leadership. It's just a small little book, but again, it's Abraham Lincoln on leadership, and to me, it's the epitome of humility and just goodness, right? Just how to treat people. He wasn't perfect at either. Like I'm definitely not, but he loved people. He wanted to communicate with people. He wanted to invest in people. And I thought he valued and saw people as an asset to an organization and didn't see himself above that, and that it was a collaborative approach. And I think that has always been something that I've admired, and reading his stuff and reading that book and going through excerpts. There's excerpts I'll take all the time from that. So that's one. I think anything to do, quite honestly, with B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning, being a psychology teacher, I think I love that, how you condition based on reward and punishment and reinforcement. What are the methods to use in certain times with regard to development of the young brain and the kids that we coach, what is best for them, and how that's constantly changing with regard to technology and to parenting and all the other things that go on. Kids are different. They're not different, but they are, if that makes sense, with regard to their stimuli. So I think anything to do with B.F. Skinner and goes a long way too. And of course, I love John Wooden, and my dad, I raised me on Don Haskins in El Paso, and so I love Don Haskins. I love anything to do with John Wooden, those kind of things, and so just the art of coaching in general. I'm a big fan. Everybody knows this, of Augie Garrido. Was always a huge fan of his. Because I grew up originally in Southern California before I moved to Texas, and so I saw Augie when he was at Fullerton when I was a little kid going to camps. And then I worked his camps when I moved to El Paso and was a coach at Texas. And he was a coach at Texas. And so, I've always admired him. So a lot about him as well.
No, that's wonderful. I love that. Well, Larry, I learned a lot today. I know that our listeners have as well. And let me be the first to say thank you for sharing and opening up your playbook and giving us so much today. But I did want to give you the opportunity to just share with our guests, and for the guests listening, for the listeners that are listening, they can find your contacts in the show notes, and I'll make sure and link those. But Larry, before you go, I know you've got a long week ahead of you and a lot of things to do, but is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners before you go?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. It's been exciting, and thank you for the opportunity to share my story and be a part of this podcast and your professionalism. Thank you so much, and good luck to everybody. If I can help in any way, and hopefully I'd love to hear from you so I can learn from you as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, which could include Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it on social media to help get the word out. Once again, thank you for joining us.